today I want to talk to you about Kochs fractal recursor, which if you go to 5below5.uk and just click on GPT store, it's in the list and you can get to it that way. Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at Kochs fractal recursor. It's a prototype sort of thought experiment. I've got a lot of them and I'm going to go through them, and this will be the first video in the list. But basically I'm going to show you how I put it together. So yeah, with that out the way, if you've ever seen the diagram or the shape of a snowflake, it's like really one shape that's been repeated and iterated. Anyway, you can look that up. The point is you have to have a reduction, otherwise it gets out of control. And so my idea was to make modes of enhancing text that basically allow you to only put in an initiator and then define the function, and then off it goes. So for a lot of these, we're going to be using the same thing. Okay, so the initiator here is Zach and Bill went up the hill to fetch a pail of Subway sandwich. Zach fell down, bumped his iPhone 12, then Bill came running after. We've used Claude 2 and GPT4 to assess the outputs. I will put links to this in my documents archive up on the site, so there will be a place where you can look through this at your own speed. So, using the following text as the initiator, so I've literally said that, use the following text as the initiator, and then put in the text. All right, so this is my actual prompt in yellow, and here come the outputs. At this point, what I've done is I've had it expose the outputs for each of the 3 stages. We're only using 3 stages in this sort of prototype. And as you can see, I'm not going to bother reading it out. What it's done is it's used enhance to make a bigger story out of it. It's made a complete meal out of it in the end. Okay, and we're not even going to look at whether it's accurate or anything like that. That's not the goal here. We're going to refine it as we move along. So this is Claude 2. So now we're going to use GPT4. Okay, and we're going to use basically the same thing, but we've got a bit of code to define it to look for a bracket initiator and use that, so we don't actually have to ask. All right, and then it's going to come back to us, enhancing the initiator text as per Koch iteration, and it's going to give us 1, 2, 3. And this is a lot better. I had to say the output from GPT was a lot better than Claude 2 for this. So for this one, we're going to explore modes. So now I've decided instead of enhance, I'm going to change it up because I've wrote the assistant so that it can take functions, but I wanted to use natural language processing, so I didn't have to actually define what the functions are. I'm just going to lean on the GPT for it to understand what the mode is. I'm just going to say sausage the text, put it in sausage mode. What does that do? Don't know. So there's no real limit to how it can be used because it's not actually defined. We're letting it interpret and elucidate. Zach and Bill went up a hill for a sandwich. Zach fell and his phone dropped. Bill help him. You can't really simplify this much, but it has. And across the progressive iterations, it's done a better job. So if anything, we're refining our output as we're going. So, but yeah, this demonstrates that it has a functional concept of operation. We don't need to tell it what simplify is. So now we're going to use Fibonacci. What could that mean? So we're just going to say, okay, Fibonacci mode, right? So we're going to enhance the initiator text. Same text, Zach and Bill up the hill to get a sandwich. So, and this is the funny thing. It actually does put notes somewhere. It goes, applying Fibonacci sequence to the initiator text involves enhancing the text in a manner where iteration increases in complexity or length in a way that corresponds to Fibonacci. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. I'll perform 3 iterations according to this sequence. And off it goes. Now, you can argue about whether this is better or worse, but it certainly has an effect. And the effect is in the way that the words are predicted. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I've tried to put it in stages so you can see we're just changing one thing and moving on, and we look at the outputs and we see what patterns we can see, what we can learn, what we can use. And it's actually a very easy way to use these tools. So for the next one, it's Fibonacci Enhance. So now what I'm doing is I'm combining two modes. So you could have done Enhance Simplify. It's interpreting the mode, and then it's just going to do its best. And if you notice that Fibonacci Enhance and Fibonacci are completely different. And again, this is ACE prompting. Yeah, as I said, it's adaptive capacity elucidation. It's just a way of approaching how you program the assistant. It's not really that fancy. You're leaning on the depth of its knowledge and connective tissue rather than trying to define everything. Like my best example is we don't need to tell it how to play poker. We just need to tell it to play poker. And in many cases, it already has that base understanding. And so then you don't need really long code. It's very lightweight, like a couple of lines. And then it's all about being concise and precise without waffle, which is what I'm not very good at right now. Like I said, it takes me longer to explain. And this is actually a pretty cool adaptation of the story. But I don't want to get hung up. You can pause and read if you want. So let's move on. The reason this prompt looks a bit weird is because Claude required nudging to remind him what we were doing. So in the previous prompt, he failed, and I had to type this to get him back on track. Okay, so then the first thing that he says to us after we've got him back on track is, sure, let me redo the iterative enhancement process with your suggested motif size reduction factor. So what we're doing now is in line with the fractal, because you don't just multiply by 3. There's a reduction factor, okay, and so that's the motif size reduction. I use 0.3. It's like a rule of the triangle or something. All right. So again, same story. We're almost at the limit of what Claude can really do because he's not made for this. Claude is amazing, but he's not really built for this. And if you look in the output, you can kind of see it. Okay, so we haven't actually lengthened the story. We just have a new story. Wet Hill, because he slipped, which is actually pretty interesting. So, you know, there was no mention of wet hills, but someone fell over, so, or something. So anyway, it's just interesting. Muddy incline, damp grass. It's trying to explain the fact that he fell and bumped his phone. Which is, I think that's pretty impressive. Anyway, Claude is always very good. But for this sort of thing, when we get to GPT4, you can see the difference immediately. So I think the prompt is just initiator. Yeah, it just takes it. It just takes the initiator. And fun fact, it's programmed to take the first thing you say as the initiator. So it's sort of like got an unattended mode where you can open up the assistant and just type. But I think in later versions, we've added the ability to give it some variables and a bit of feedback so it confirms them and stuff. But we're getting there. So as you can see here, we're using Kochs iteration enhance with initiator text, same text. And off it goes. And with the reduction, it got big, it got bigger, and it kind of got bigger, but it's been reduced. So it will reduce in the second and the third stages. So as you can see here, we've now got a much more well-written version of the same story. So now I wanted to try different words for the mode. So we're going to try enrich. So enrich is not the same as expand, is not the same as enhance. These have different meanings, and those meanings are interpreted by the knowledge of the AI and the natural language processor. So that means depending on your mileage may vary depending on what you're working with. But if we're working with GPT-4, then we can expect this sort of behavior. So here we go. We're doing it with enrich. And like I said, if I just slightly move it over, you can see the difference between our last mode and the current mode. And you can see they're roughly the same length, but they are it's definitely written in a different way. Okay. And again, we're not really talking about the actual quality of the writing, as long as it's not, because what I look for is I look for a natural retelling of events. So it can't invent too many details beyond descriptive flourish, and it can't do anything major, but it needs to kind of fill it out. All right. So, you could go from a small idea to a slightly more formed out idea. And there's ways of guiding how it's going to fill it in as well. At the moment, I'm just letting it do what it wants. So it is just going to do whatever the hell it wants. There's no like style guidance or ghostwriter guidance or anything like that right now. I wanted a more dynamic interface. Variables didn't need to be set or understood, because before you had to kind of know what it could do to be able to use it. So we take the supplied text as the initiator at the start of the conversation, and then the assistant will ask the human to set the operation function, reductive amount, and iterations. So this is another thing which we've hit on, is doing all these iterations right now, and it's showing us all the iterations. I'm eventually going to turn it off, and then you can just go for n iterations. So you could have 1,000 steps, right? And it's just going to keep going and spit out what it has at the end. And so I thought it would just be garbage, but actually it's not. So, I worried that it was going to degrade or collapse, but actually it just does exactly what you want and fast. So anyway, I've got it set to enrich with a reduction ratio of 0.33, and we're going to do 3 iterations. And as you can see here, Claude exploded. So yeah, Claude exploded. And it's probably because we actually optimized it for GPT4. So you can't just keep running the same thing in both sides. And it's not really fair, because we've made alterations to optimize it for GPT4. So it hooks into that model specifically. Anyway, so here he is losing his mind, trying to replay this story. All right. So getting back to GPT-4, it's the same thing. Motif reduction 0.33, iterations 3, initial text. All right. And we're still exposing all the stages at the moment. We're going to turn that off eventually. So we start off with a much bigger, an enriched version of the story, which gets enriched again, but smaller, and then gets enriched again, but smaller. So it's the way I see it is they turn it into waffle and then chip that waffle away. So it's sort of like double and distill, and it hangs on to the stuff that seems more natural. And so then you end up with seeking a savory subway treat. Zach and Bill ascended the hill. Zach's slip caused a brief iPhone scare. Bill, attentive and swift, rushed to aid. And to be honest, not bad. So now we're going to try our old friend Fibonacci Enhance, because I kind of found that was working really nicely. So I'll just put that like that, and you can pause the screen and read this if you want. I'm not going to read all of it. The thing I'm most interested in is this part, which is something really interesting. So Fibonacci Enhance isn't a predefined enhancement function in the Kochs fractal text enhancement process as outlined in the provided document. That's the code I use to put all of the instructions for the assistant. The available enhancement functions include options like summarize, simplify, enrich, expand. So I put in a couple, but I didn't define them. Something I've learned from training AI models is that if you give it 3 examples of a thing in the right way, it can project a 4th. So it can try to make things like an imaginary thing you've never shown it. And so this is an example of that. It's trying to figure out what the hell I mean by Fibonacci enhance. And so what it's done is it's on the fly gone, oh, well, it's adding 2 previous numbers to get the next one. What does that mean in the context of text generation? It means this. So we've exposed a sort of a functionality that's already there. It's hard to tell it how to do it, because it's a complicated thing, but it's just a mathematical pattern. So it's able to do it super easily, like better than you could imagine, because it would be very complex to do. But for this, it's what it was built for. So it just sort of takes to it like a fish in water. And even with the reduction ratio, because of the Fibonacci, that stops it from getting shorter, is my theory. I haven't really had the time to expand it too much, but this is the final. So what this one does is it goes 1, 2, 3, and then a final iteration. And I've refactored the code, so I'm going to turn these phases off. So you won't see these soon. I'm going to put them in silent mode effectively. Just literally saying, don't show me the stages, only show me the final, right? And then I did a lot of testing to see that it was actually doing that properly. So now we get to version 2.0. So now I want to create a version capable of much higher iterations without sacrificing output window length limits. So one problem with when you want to expand text is obviously that if you have stages to it to refine, it's kind of like upscaling in stages. You know, you upscale it a bit and a bit and a bit, and you bring it back. It's like, so you can't, because obviously you run out of characters in the output. So obviously I want to turn off any kind of feedback. I want to turn off any kind of internal commentary and only get that last output. And then obviously running the reduction motif will stop it from getting too large. And then obviously you can just take a small amount of text and you can get a manageable amount of text out. And all I've done is put this text in and so it's less tokens in, less tokens out, which is going to be more optimized in terms of the token cost. So, but it also reduces hallucination, because one thing I noticed was if you start talking about things in the script, in the conversation, or even if you don't, if it's talking about things in its script, in its outputs, that somehow becomes part of the conversation and it affects the outputs of future prompts. So to stop you having to like restart the chat to make sure you're getting a proper output every time, I just silenced all feedback and commentary. So now we're going to take a look at enrich. So we're doing 12 iterations just like before. We're doing 0.33 reduction, enrich. We're going to do the same sort of piece of text there. So in the midst of a tranquil afternoon, Zach and Bill embark. I'm not going to read it all out. You can pause it if you want. But the point is, this has done 12 loops, not 3. It's reducing it by 0.33, and we're using enrich. Okay. We can only hope that it's doing what I asked it to do. But it's definitely doing what I wanted it to do. Whether it's strictly doing what I'm asking is a different question. But it is working. And this is pretty nice. Considering we've given it like nothing, this is not bad. I've certainly seen worse on with some websites. So if I go to the next one, we've got Fibonacci Enhance. Now, this is going to do its best. Because again, it doesn't know what that means. You know, I could have said sausage expand. Like, what's that going to do? Don't know. But certainly you could set your enhancement function to any words you want. Your mileage may vary. It's going to do something. That's the thing about AI. You can use abstract terms and then it will try to mathematically interpret what the hell you're trying to ask. So here we go. And again, we've got on another different, like I said, you could rewind it now. You could pause the screen, read it quick. But we can still mix modes, because really I'm just checking that I'm doing the engineering side of this here. I'm just making sure that what I'm seeing is consistent with what I was seeing before after having changed all the programming, and it's working. So that's great. And so what I thought now was, well, why don't we give it something a little bit more real world? So I took a few pieces of text from another bot, which I've written, which we'll go over, I'm sure. So this is the prompt. Grief engulfed Pierre, a storm that threatened to unmoor him from his newfound purpose. But in the depths of his sorrow, a fierce determination took root. He channeled his grief into an unyielding resolve to honor Jin's legacy. Pierre dedicated himself to perfecting his piloting skills, pushing the boundaries of what he and his starfighter could achieve. It was just a short story that I generated as an adventure. You know, you generate the adventure in first person with the bot, which I wrote, and then it gives you a story at the end. And this is just a piece of that. I think it's from chapter 1 or maybe chapter 2, probably like the end of chapter 1. Anyway, the point is we've given it a decent something to chew on. So if I'm an AI and I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, oh, grief. Oh, there's some emotion. Name. We're talking about this guy. A storm. I might get confused about that. Unmoor. Oh, maybe this is about boats. Newfound purpose. Okay, that's a pretty strong one. Depths of sorrow. More emotion. Fierce determination. Channeling grief. More emotion. Unyield resolve. Yeah, more plot stuff. Honor. Jin. Someone's legacy. Someone is emotional about this person. So now I've got a bit of a relationship. Dedicates himself to perfecting his piloting skills. Oh, piloting. So it's not a boat. And then starfighter. And that's the end. Now it knows. We're dealing with sci-fi. Okay? So this is just, a little bit of ground to cover there. But if we go into the enhancement process now, we're going to do 0.33, expand, 10 iterations. Here's the initial text. And boom, there's the piece. All right. And so what it's done is it is effectively done 10 iterations and it's applied that fractal. I struggle. It's not an algorithm. It's a recursive iterator. But it's kind of abstract what it actually does. But clearly it doesn't just make it, it didn't just make it 10 times as long. Okay, is the point. Now we're going to use our old friend Fibonacci Enhance. Can you see a pattern forming? I do try to only change one thing so you can follow what the hell's going on. But again, this document and others will be up on 5below5.uk in an archive sort of section. And it'll have all the documents that are from each video. All right. That way, if the links ever disappear from YouTube, it doesn't matter. Right. So let's take a look at what happens when we use Fibonacci Enhance here. Now, feel free to pause and read it if you want. But we're going to try and move on quickly because, this is one of my short videos again. So there it is. We put our thing in. All we've done is put that in because we already confirmed the settings, so it doesn't need to change them, which is a nice feature of the assistants. And now it's written us. It's a more detailed story, and it's got different stuff in different places. It's not just about emotion. There's a lot more descriptive information in here, which is kind of relevant. But as I said before, it started going on about the wind. There's no wind in space. So what it's doing is it's taking every sentence piece by piece. It's not taking the full context. So if you actually read it, it looks good. And when you read it, it sounds impressive. But when you actually think about it, he starts off in a maelstrom of grief and feels the tempest sphere winds. It's a nascent so it's like it doesn't really know what's going on. It's impressive, but it's taking each sentence. So look, the storm that threatened to unmoor him is a literal storm. But then it is saved by the fact that we're actually talking metaphorically about his struggle here, right? So if it weren't for his newfound purpose being there, this would have lost it. It would have been talking about him flying around in the clouds and like falling and stuff. So it really depends what you're putting into it. Like, but anyway, my main point was that it doesn't really know this is even a sci-fi genre until later when it picks up on the starfighter stuff. Okay. So, but again, we can fix all of that with additional guidance and style programming. So it just need to be clear about what you're telling it to do. Anyway, so 12 iterations with Fibonacci Enhance. I might just put the two next to each other quick. They expand. Well, I guess this had 12 and this had 10. But to be honest, one of them is expand and one of them is Fibonacci Enhance. So you could look at those two real quick if you want. Give them a read. but it's more to look at what's going on. It's not about what's written, or it's about what it's doing and then how we can use that. So let's use a new passage of text. So we've decided to use a bigger passage of text now. So 2 paragraphs. If you want to pause it and read it, go for it. I'm not going to read it. It's just another example of a text adventure log story. Okay, they're good for spitballing. Anyway, if I take that passage and throw it in, an interesting thing is that when you put it in, it's concatenated it. So, okay, so Jane entail, Jane scrapyard, Jane scrapyard. So I've put it all in, and it has rewritten, and then so it's rewritten it, summarized it, and shortened it, which isn't really what you wanted to do. What we're going to do is increase the iterations with expand, enrich, enhance now. So, you know, I would have expected it, because this is actually on expand, actually. So yeah, it's fine. I'm not going to look at the whole thing. I just want to show that the length has gotten, it's bigger. Like this is 63, and this is 129 with Fibonacci. And you can see it is longer. And if I was to, like I said, what I'll do is I'll just zoom in there, pause it, and there, pause it, and then here, this is the 129 version. Okay. Right, so if you cared, I'm sure you paused it and read it. Anyway, my point is, it's still working, and now we can do many iterations silently on quite a large piece of text as well. So obviously the use of this isn't just fiction, although yeah, it is, it's just fiction. But my point is, you know, this can be applied to a lot of things, and you don't have to do that many iterations. You don't have to do this many. So this is like a sort of one purpose sort of Swiss Army knife for high loop count text transformation. It's pretty good. I like it. Anyway, it's the same one as before. So we've used Pierre. It is Pierre in the Starfighter again. All right, so enhance 0.33 and 12. Done this. So this is now looking at a chain of text, because something else that made me, I was like, well, it's all very well and good, but what if when you break it up and put it back together again, it doesn't make no sense? Yeah. So what we've done is we've taken the first piece of that, of this text, it's turned into that. So feel free to pause it and read it. So the next one is enhance scientific. Because I wondered, well, if we can enhance, can we enhance and then put a genre? So I said enhance scientific. And this is what it ended up doing. All right. There's the initial text. And this is how it came out. We've done 24 iterations with a reduction ratio of 0.33. Technologically advanced parameters of his starfighter. An innovation in aerospace mastery. This is what I mean. It's throwing a bunch of science words. His emotional singularity was a scientifically quantifiable determination. There, mate. I love it. All right. It got a bit too floaty there. Stop showing off, GPT. So yeah, okay, because enhanced scientific doesn't really have a meaning, but what it took from that was put a load of clever words. So we go back to expand with iteration on 63 for comparison. And there we have it. So scientific. I love it. So yeah, you want to sound clever? Try clever mode. Put it in clever mode and see what happens. So this is where we test coherence. I wrote the wrong intro on the last thing. So we're going to do living machines in Jane's workshop. So feel free to pause it and read it. if you want. If you've watched this far, then I'm sure you will. This is a starting point for editing down a first chapter. This isn't trying to replace writers, guys, okay? This is a writer's aid or tool. Nothing more. Because you put your own stuff in. That's the concept. You put your stuff in, you let it do a bit of stuff, and then you strike out all the, anyway. It might be no use to you, all right? It might be no use to you. But I see people doing full tweet accounts and YouTube channels, and, people are doing this stuff. So I wonder, can we make it better? Because some of it's bad. What we're going to do in the next one is take the next piece of text. So this and this are in sequence. So this is the next paragraph. So now it's going to write. So amidst the canvas of space, standing in a delicate outline of, she stood, tracing the outline of Earth. Okay, where is she? A legend passed down of generations of lunar dwellers. I mean, it's kind of implying that she's on the moon. Does it say anything about where she actually is? Forgotten world. I mean, it hasn't actually said that yet. So let me just get that so you can read it, guys. So we're basically just taking a sequence of text now, letting it do its thing, and then seeing if they actually... We don't want Chinese whispers, basically. So journey home, journey discover, to connect, avoid. Okay, that's interesting. And then the next one, in a shadowed landscape of the moon. Love it. And it's not talking about where she is. So it's best to do this in a conversation so that it still gains a bit of knowledge and context, because that's kind of like a human feedback thing. If you do this in a conversation, you're telling it what's right and what's not. And then that will steer the outputs of the next operations. So you can get quite close to where you want to be, and then it's just editing, which it always is, Anyway, what I'm putting in, and I'm getting out 5 to 6 times out what I'm putting in. And the thing is, I know how I could steer names, places, themes, relationships, locations, aesthetics, speaking patterns. I know all of that is achievable and easily. It's just a case of writing out. It's a bit like writing out screen direction for a theatrical play, actually. You have all these notes, and you basically put those notes into the system and tell it to take them into account while doing this part, and it still works. And then it won't just come out with random stuff. It'll come out using your stuff. Because what are words at the end of the day? Right. And I think that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for this one. If you want to check out Kochs Recursor, you want to give it a spin, maybe you want to put it in sausage mode. Okay, so if you just run over to 5below5.uk, you can just go to my GPT store and you will find Kochs Recursor right here. And there it is. Thanks for watching. See you next time.